They use Google Hangouts for these things?
Yes, they do. Good afternoon. Glad to have everybody here. I'm Kenji.
I'm Matthew.
We are founders at Acuity.co. We provide outsourced accounting solutions, everything from fractional CFOs to controllers and bookkeeping. So we work with a lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs on their financial accounting needs. We're doing something a little different. We're kind of using YouTube Live lately, and we're just trying to get content out a little more readily. So we'd love to get feedback from you guys out there about how the content's coming or things you'd like to see. Just so you know, we typically do weekly a little funky series called Drink While You Think. That's honestly just Matthew and I pontificating, debating things. We go in very quick lightning round questions. We're usually having a glass of something on the session, talking about everything from being entrepreneurs to accounting, financial things going on, being parents of teenagers, the Falcons, all kinds of sports things that run through our minds. So, but anyway, very informal. Feel free to jump in and fire things at us during that each week. We're looking to start another series too that'll be a little bit more accounting technical specific. If we have business owners out there who maybe having a challenge inside of Gusto or QuickBooks Online or Xero, something in their accounting function they need help with. We're going to start trying to post some specific, almost think about them like video FAQs, just in a way to help you out. We'll try to put content out there very quickly for you just to help you on that. And then finally, kind of what we're doing here is kicking off these important business topics that are kind of being led by a subject matter expert or an industry expert. Think of it kind of like a little bit more of a modern version of a webinar. So with that, we'll kind of get into it. Kind of pains me a little bit to think of this guy being a subject matter expert, but in this case, you are.
Oh yeah, unfortunately,
just because of all you went through. But the topic is identity theft, and we think about it typically individually when our own identity gets taken. Probably a lot of us have gone through that. But we don't often think about too the impact it may have in our businesses when you're either a key executive, an owner, or an accounting or finance team member is where we're seeing a lot of this. So with all that, wanted to kind of go ahead and get the story started. This is a very, a lot of your expertise, Matthew, comes from what happened to you. So on Sunday, July the 15th, you and I were on a phone call.
We were on a phone call. It was about 2:45. So, I can't even remember what we're talking about because half the time when I talk to you, it's not very important. It's just kind of BS. But so I'm talking to Kenji on the phone. We've gotten new dogs, so I'm in the backyard watching the dogs run around. And as it is customary with your cell phone carriers, the phone drops. So not out of the realm of nothing crazy yet. I'm not. Yeah. I almost think nothing of it.
I on the other end just thought it was a drop, or you hung up on me or something and waited for you to call back and you never did.
Yeah. So I go immediately, like you do, you feel guilty. I don't have anything left to say to Kenji, but I still feel like I should call him back because my phone dropped. So I hit it and it says no service, which is kind of a weird, it's weird. So I'm thinking something happened to the cell tower in the area or something. But it was a different message on my machine. It was it wasn't like there was one bar. It was like no service. So I feel kind of bad, and maybe this is the guilt in me growing up in El Paso, Texas. We grew up with guilt there. It's pretty heavily Catholic.
It's everywhere
in influenced community. So that's a specialty in that community. So I go upstairs to check my wife's Laura's phone, and hers is fine. And I think that's weird because I have no service and she has full service, which maybe just be karmic, but that's kind of odd. Then I started checking the kids' phones, and their phones were fine, and they're on the same service. So
something's clearly going on with your phone.
So something's off. I'm not quite freaking out at this point, but something's off.
Yeah.
So I go back downstairs and I'm messing with the apps on my phone, seeing if something else works. And one of the apps says you have to log in through Gmail. and I try to log into the app, and Pokemon Go.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the app was. I hope you heard that. He was checking in on his Pokemon Go app.
Yeah. So I'm an avid Pokemon Go player. When you have 2 kids and one of them,
it's a separate issue for a separate day. Yeah. We may or may not discuss.
So
but
I try to log into Pokemon Go, and it says your password's incorrect. And I use my personal Gmail password to log into that.
So now it's getting a little bit.
So
getting spooked yet?
So the funny thing is, like a phone call drop in and everybody's phone not working, like that's not a big deal. But I can't log into Pokemon Go. Like I'm stopping everything. And I go log on to my computer, and I go straight to that Gmail account, which is my personal Gmail account. And the last 6 messages are: password's been changed. Did you change the password? Do you think?
So at that point now,
something's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. At that point, like I have a problem.
Yeah. No longer a bad carrier issue or cell phone tower.
This is not AT&T is sloughing off on their job, which they did, but in a different way.
We'll get to that.
This is not AT&T's like towers down or something. This is, I'm like, holy crap! Like passwords are changing in front of my face on email accounts.
So you can see them, the different passwords cycling through, at least from notifications in your inbox. Is that what you're seeing?
That's right. I'm in my inbox. I'm seeing the inbox at the time. I don't know how if it just hasn't changed yet to kick me out, or what. But and maybe this is fuzzy because I have to I think it didn't kick me out. I've learned a lot about Gmail since. So I log in and try to change my password on my Gmail account. And it's like, there was a login attempt. Did you see this? Then I see on my phone, I have all my other emails on my phone. I see attempts to, that's what it was. I saw because as soon as my email changes, it cuts over. It doesn't, as soon as you change a password in Gmail, it cuts over and you no longer can see the updates.
Right.
Like immediately cut you out. So I could see up until the time the password changes, which were the password notifications. So you get the password notifications still to your old emails. And
I mean, well, so you and I probably connect at this point, right? You're now doing research.
Then I go upstairs and get my son's phone. I think I called you at that point.
Yeah.
We could probably check his history and see when we called. But this is in the first hour for sure. So
at this point, I think if I remember when we were talking, we were clear at this point that you could see the fact that it wasn't you, was going into your email account and now changing passwords. You know that at this point now it's no longer an error. It is an identity theft, which again, most of us have probably experienced. I think we typically see them in credit cards, things like that. I think all of us had to swap credit cards because there's been fraudulent activity. That's a form of identity theft. At this point, though, I kind of remember talking about this, but I'm curious of your recollection or where next when it was like, okay, identity has been taken, but like, was this part of a mass, like a whole bunch of people got theirs taken or just you? Like,
yeah, I'm not there yet. So the next thing I do, I'm calling AT&T to get my phone back. So I'm calling the fraud center at AT&T. I finally get through to the fraud center at AT&T to get my phone number back. They said, oh, don't worry. Somebody just probably stole. The people are doing this all the time. They come into one of our stores. They take over your SIM card. They use it to buy phones. We ship the phones. You know, it's basically their form of stealing cell phones. Like they're trying to make $1,000 on cell phones, or the cell phone they have in front of them, or whatever they've done. That I said, how can they do that? Well, they said, well, they have to have your PIN number, and they have to have
from ID or something.
Maybe no, I think they just need the PIN number. Like it's some kind of crazy thing, which is some 4-digit PIN that you set up with AT&T or T-Mobile or whatever your carrier is. That
I don't remember setting one of those up. Honestly, I don't even.
But I'm like, you don't have to get their driver's license and see it's me when you give them my phone when I'm talking on the phone over to somebody else? And they're like, no, we don't have to do that. Throughout the process, I have to say, after being a customer of AT&T for 25 or 30 years, however long it's been now, terrible support through the whole process. Very disappointing. But that's kind of a tangent. I won't rant on AT&T, but you're not going to get help from your carrier when they steal your phone number. When they not even steal, when they walk into the store and they give your phone number, a new SIM card to somebody with your phone number on it. So at that point, I figured out what I need to do. We lock the guy out of my phone at that point. So I'm locked out. He's locked out. I have to go to a corporate store of AT&T, which they sent me to the wrong store, right?
Sure.
You know, I didn't tell you that part. They sent me to the wrong store. And this is like getting to where it's closing time. And then I finally get to the right store. But anyway, before I go to the store, I'm like, first get the cell phone locked down, then get them kicked out of email in some fashion. So then I get I do see a second email attempting to get changed, which they failed to change.
So your personal account,
still my second personal account.
Another personal account.
So luckily for me that I didn't have my work emails associated with my AT&T account, because they were able to breach my AT&T account immediately and see everything in my AT&T account, which was 2 personal email addresses. So I'm kind of annoyed right now at somebody trying to ruin my Sunday for $1,000 worth of cell phones at this point. But so I get into Gmail, the one email that was compromised was my personal Gmail, and I get them kicked out of that. I get logged in. I start doing like, how do I make sure they're logged out of it? And there's a way to force them out. So I get them forced out of that. And then it occurs to me, I kind of want to know, as I'm looking through all the settings in Gmail, I realize, oh, you can, or do it. And I'm Googling the whole time. I go through and figure out that they've done searches on my.
Remember, you and I were kind of talking at this point. I mean,
I think this is when I called you.
Yeah, we talk a lot. Well, we talked a couple times.
I talked.
But I remember we were somewhere in there. I felt like when you were going through this, it was like, all right, what happened? Let's get that figured out. 2, let's get it fixed or stopped. Kind of stop the bleeding. And then it was like we started kind of moving into, and you were asking the question like, well, why? Like, okay, $1,000 cell phone. It's a lot of work to do this.
Yeah, that seems like a lot of work, because I got them kicked out in an hour of my cell phone.
Why were they obsessed with email? And it was just kind of
it didn't make any sense.
So we were in that why phase, I think, at this point.
So yeah, and the why phase stopped when I looked at the history in Google. So what they had been doing is deleting emails as soon as they came in. So you couldn't see in your inbox the emails that have it. If you look in your deleted folders, you can see all the emails that were coming in. But when I looked in my history of what I had been doing in my Google account since they did it, within 10 minutes of changing my cell phone number, they had changed the password to my personal email, and they had done web searches on 2 client names of mine, the word password, the word 1Pass, all of the cryptocurrency exchanges. So they had Googled, they had searched for Gemini, Coinbase, anything. So they were looking for passwords, they were looking for account information, and they were looking for anything related to 2 of my particular high-profile clients.
Yeah. So I think as soon as you were able to see the search history within your inbox and what they were looking for, I think that's when it was. I know we were both kind of freaked out in particular of like, you have specifically been targeted. It wasn't just like, oh, I was part of one large batch of group of people who got their identity stolen. This was a very, very specific conscious choice to go after you and look for any place where you may have access to these crypto exchanges, these clients. We mentioned earlier that we work with a lot of entrepreneurs. Matthew in particular works with a lot of cryptocurrency clients. So there's some interesting dynamics around that from a fiduciary standpoint. Right. So that I know really, I think at that point we realized what the ultimate goal was to have a very coordinated, targeted attack. And I guess to kind of rewind on all this, or just kind of maybe talk high level, what we ended up finding out was this was kind of referred to as a SIM swap attack.
SIM swap attack. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about like we didn't know why, but like the steps that kind of they took and like how it all happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it turns out, in the kind of the postmortem part of this, one of the huge lessons learned, one, there's a couple good resources out to help to if this happens to you. That was a good one. Actually, the government has a great site called identitytheft.gov that the FTC runs. So in kind of hindsight, if I had started there, it would have streamlined kind of my prioritization, because it kind of sequences you through. Have you changed these passwords? Have you looked at this history? I believe that's how I figured out how to look for my Google history, because it was one of the steps in there, because I was just Googling everything and what should I do? What should I do? What do you do? So that was a really helpful site.
And I'll post those links in the notes as soon as we finish up with the broadcast.
Yeah, and then the big, huge takeaway, because we shared this with all of our clients as soon as it happened, was we really need to figure out with two-factor authentication. A lot of us feel really comfortable that we're really secure. But what we haven't really thought through a lot of times, and why people are going after the SIM cards, is it turns two-factor authentication into one-factor. When I say that, so if I need to log into my Gmail account and I have it set to SMS text, and I need my password in my SMS text. Well, if your password, when you reset it, goes to my SMS text, if you have the SMS text, which is the SIM card, you can have full control of that person's email. So the other thing we realize, if somebody steals your device and you're using a two-factor on it, and you can recover your passwords through that two-factor or something else, like with the physical device, and they get it unlocked, that's a whole other ballgame. Because we talk about Google Auth and some of the other products on there. With that just means you have a token. So all of the clients we worked with, I've looked at this. We looked at every place where we really had a single point of failure in the security kind of structure using these accounts, because AT&T is not going to help. They're really slow to change, and these softwares have put these things in place. But if you have your password, if you have your email and your text and your phone all come into the same device, it really can be a single point of failure.
Yeah. So I think tracing that through about what that SIM swap attack is, first part, they're going to go out there and find a way to get that PIN number. And that works at most phone carriers. If you have that PIN number, they have historically been able to take over your phone, your SIM card very, very easily. We'll talk in a minute about what allowed that to happen.
Everybody should, if you're on T-Mobile or AT&T, you should change your 4-digit PIN immediately. So in the aftermath of this, not just mine, but this has happened to several people now. It's come out that T-Mobile and AT&T were both compromised through second-party vendors for all their PIN numbers. I think the crack staff at AT&T is not very helpful as well.
Well, what happened on both two of those, just so people are aware, when they say that compromised by a third party, actually T-Mobile's was with Apple, the iTunes store, not Apple's fault, but where the security flaw in both cases, from what I understand, with AT&T and T-Mobile, was you could attempt and try to guess that PIN number as many times as you wanted. So that's a bad security protocol. They
especially with a 4-digit PIN.
They could run that as many times as they wanted to across those third parties, and it didn't trigger any issue or locking of the account. So that's how both AT&T and T-Mobile were both compromised. So anyway, continue.
Yeah, and so everybody needs to change their PIN immediately, but that's an easy thing to do that could help, because somebody gets the wrong PIN. But I'm working now on trying to figure out if we can, I know AT&T is getting sued now by somebody that happened in the space that lost $24 million because they were able to compromise access to other accounts through the SIM card attack. So there's a huge lawsuit against AT&T on this now in the space on this very attack. So hopefully they start cracking down and require a driver's license or some identification to change in SIM cards, which, believe it or not, is not required to change out your SIM card, even when the phone is in use at the time in which they make that request. So
now that I think has changed to some extent, but I think then it points to, again, the vulnerability with the SIM card is that, like we talked about, you forget your password, say, hey, send me a text. Well, if you're holding on to that SIM card and change it to you, all you do is change the password right there as soon as the text came in, because now you've got control of that SMS or text message through the SIM card. That's essentially kind of how these attacks work. But when you think about it, I think all of us probably have a lot of different backups. We think we're being safe by having that process in place. And it's actually a really easy vulnerability for someone to exploit, which is the challenge that kind of we saw. So carriers have been in some trouble about this. That's kind of working out. So tell me about, like, they weren't the ones who carried this out. They're the ones who left it open to the criminal element. Did you ever find out who the criminals were or who they?
So I knew this happened in Birmingham, Alabama, because somebody in AT&T accidentally told me on the phone. I found out they accidentally told me because after that,
they had to walk into a store physically.
They walked into a physical store in Birmingham, Alabama, and
gave the pin,
supposedly, and got that information. So AT&T first tells me, we can't do anything, call the police. And I'm like, so I call the police in Birmingham, and they're like, which store? Like, we're not going to every store. So I call AT&T back, and they said, we can't tell you which store. And I'm like, you know what store, right? Yeah, we can't tell you. You have to issue a subpoena to us to tell you this, to get that. I was like, you can't be serious. Like,
they were serious.
Well, I didn't need a subpoena. I had to go through what ended up being a 45-day process, which assume that you had video backup or video evidence on anybody, like, that's all gone. Assume that a clerk was not acting in conjunction with these guys and would have remembered somebody instead of going the next day, going 45 days later is a totally different ballgame. Like, who came in yesterday at 2:45 is a whole different question than who came in 45 days ago at 2:45, right? So AT&T was able to string this out for 45 days and process it, and there was either intentional or not intentional misinformation toward me, like even on how I would get information from them. I was given the wrong phone number. I was given the wrong department. I was given the wrong, and then I was required to send it in by fax or mail, which I didn't even know.
So lots of help there.
Do you know where the closest fax machine to you is ever?
They exist. I don't even know where they're still out there.
So,
but I guess
anyway,
back to the criminal side,
I guess it was pretty bad.
You can't. I mean, that's what I think we always think of. Like, well, who was the bad guy who was perpetrating this? I guess unknown at this point. Probably will never be known.
We think it was a team. So from my Google searches and the information I've been able to gather, I know that the SIM card was taken in Birmingham, and then that from Birmingham, was not where the Gmail was accessed from. So somebody was hired that either had a fake ID that had my name or something like that. And then somebody else accessed from a different part of the country. It was in the United States. It was a U.S. attack. Some of these aren't U.S. attacks in general. But they knew enough about me. They did search everybody on my LinkedIn profile at the time. So it was disconcerting. Yeah. I mean,
anytime your privacy, whether I think it's digital or physical,
I can remember thinking before I knew it was intentional. It's like, is this going to be worse if it's like random, or is this going to be worse if it's intentional?
And do you have
I mean, it sucks both ways. But you feel pretty awful when it's intentional.
Intentional's got to be worse, right? I mean, that's how I feel that way.
I think it's worse, but that's the kind that happened to me. So I'm pretty sure other people think that.
I mean, that's your point. Not to say that others people, but I think when someone specifically goes that works in a team, coordinated effort to come after you, I think that's certainly disconcerting. You mentioned quickly, and the other parties involved. It sounds like law enforcement can't do really much about this. There's not a lot they can do unless AT&T is cooperating.
If AT&T had cooperated, law enforcement would have been out there that day. They were really helpful. Birmingham was helpful. Atlanta was helpful. The Atlanta police were really frustrated with AT&T, where they were like, seriously? He's like, you should sue them. They did say, like, I don't think they told me to sue them, but that was the tenor.
Willing to help,
like they were willing to help, but they're like,
AT&T.
without information, this is very difficult. And if they're going to stonewall you, like, they're going to wait till the videos are, if they're on 30-day saves, like, they're going to try to extend it out past 30 days in store and stuff like that. So they were relatively skeptical on AT&T. AT&T was the big disappointment through the whole thing, Yeah.
So just again, maybe give background on what happened, kind of walking us through all of it, which I think is helpful for other people who are listening to be looking for some of those same things that happened to you. I guess though, at the 30,000 foot level, I mean, again, why you? Why did you get picked on?
Well, one client in particular that I have had a very successful, kind of an 8-figure token sale. So they knew that there's lots of press about them having 8 figures in the bank, and in 8 to 9 figures in cryptocurrency on top of that. So I think there's some assumptions there that I have access to those, kind of being in the CFO role at those companies. I think other people, most of the other people that have been attacked have been in has actually been in the CEO role. So that makes me think that they had done more due diligence. I know that I've come in and really helped a couple of our clients get their financial controls in place. So, or maybe the other ones didn't have CFOs, or they would have targeted them. So that was it was well researched. They definitely will run in a playbook. It was get the SIM card, notify me. I'm going to run these Google searches. I'm going to see what I can get out of the Google searches and go from there.
Yeah. In particular, in yours sounds like if I can get on one of the exchanges that hold the cryptocurrency, if they're leaving the currency on exchanges, then let's see if we can get it and pull it out quickly.
That's where people have gotten just hammered.
Talk a little bit about
one of the other guys, the guy that lost 24 million. He had money in exchanges. So this
will be a little relevant to those who are in the crypto space. So kind of hang with us. We'll kind of circle back to other things, but on the crypto space,
anybody who even wants to dabble in crypto, I mean, if you're going to have $1,000 in crypto and you're not going to be a big trader, I think you should buy a Trezor or some kind of hardware device to keep it off.
Talk about what a Trezor is or what these devices do.
So we've just actually came out with our cold and hot storage thing for the office. People have been asking us, what do we do to hold our cryptocurrency? Like, how do you hold your cryptocurrency in the most secure way possible? There've been tons of exchange hacks, Mt. Gox, a couple of the other ones. This one with the guy that lost 24 million that's suing AT&T because of the SIM card breach. The difference between exchanges and what we refer to as cold storage, where you have like either a USB device or a USB-like device like a Trezor or a Ledger that plugs into your computer, is where you're holding your private key. And basically, your private key is basically your signature that you can send, like if you were signing a check in the cash world. So the SIM card attacks were designed to get to the exchanges, because at the exchanges, if you take over the account, you have signing authority. The nice thing about the cold storage is that you have a physical thing with you that requires another password to be able to sign or transfer any funds. So luckily for us, in my situation, all of the everything that we had was in cold storage. We just, as a practice, for the 2 clients that they were targeting, and for us, for our company, and for us personally, me and my wife, everything in cryptocurrency we keep offline in cold storage. We've just followed that best practice.
Yeah.
So we're lucky that we were in a situation when we were needing to exchange, where had something in the exchange at that time, because that would have been at risk.
Yeah, check out, Matthew referenced it. We did put out a couple months ago a crypto hot and cold storage guide, and you can go out to the acuity.co webpage under resources and pull it up there and download it. It's got some more practical tips about how to do that. Yeah. If you're a company that has crypto, if you're even dabbling in it as an investor, whatever it might be, take a look at it.
Yeah, we designed it we designed it before the identity theft, because we've been working with people about it, but people have been asking us about it a lot, like how they should store their crypto and things like that. So we finally came out with a little pretty document that kind of demonstrates. It was intended for people with more than $1 million in crypto, but you can just scale it down if you have less than $1 million in crypto. And what to keep offline, what to keep online, what to keep in hot and cold, and what to have multi-sig. So that, like, in the crypto world, you can also have where you need 2 signatures instead of 1, or well, you can have it. It's
if you ever want to talk crypto, this is the guy. I mean, you can tell. I'm gonna have to in a minute kind of like gag him, because he's Mr. Crypto, loves it. But no, if you're going through any of these, take a look at the guide, reach out to us, and connect with Matthew in particular, because he's got a lot of experience in crypto. Jumping out of crypto, kind of in just the regular kind of business corporate world, you mentioned just kind of that awareness of like, listen, you were targeted because you're an executive, you're a CFO for companies. I think we've seen to where just the general old business email compromise attacks are very prevalent these days. And I think people look at them now and go, oh, those are easy to spot in hindsight. But these typically, I think in our company at Acuity, I'd say our staff probably get at least an email a week from either me or Matthew, someone from me or either me or Matthew, purporting to be us, asking people to transfer funds, right? And so we can get pretty good about sniffing that out, but that happens all of the time now.
It's pretty funny when you have 10 CFOs in your company and you have 30 controllers and 30 bookkeepers. So you have the titles that these people are attacking more frequently. So I feel like we might think that those emails are pretty easy to spot now, but we have a Slack channel for them now.
Yeah.
So we can like post them because they're kind of fun.
But I think the challenge is they're probably a little more sophisticated than people think. I mean, they send them out to lots of people with the titles that we may have of CEOs or founders. And what they're looking for, is an executive and authority, not hard to spoof, which just means kind of making your email account look like mine or Matthew's. Not hard to spoof, looking for someone in authority. They will very frequently in those emails use very casual, familiar kind of language. It won't sound crazy, formal, kind of like the old, what was the Nigerian princes? Those sounded very formal. These sound very informal. And then the other thing I don't think people realize they're doing too is they are targeting times of day when they know that staff are typically very busy, right? They're hoping that someone maybe gets it and goes, oh, Matthew asked me to transfer some funds real quick. And they're kind of in the middle of things and working fast. And maybe, okay, fine, I'll just do it. I've got a bunch of other stuff I have to get back to. So those are, it's not the same thing, but we're certainly seeing, I think, an awareness that if you're an executive, especially if you're in the financial capacity, like we are at Acuity, like many of our other peers are, have to just be extra diligent, because people are going to try to find a way, whether it's very, very crafty, like with Matthew's situation on the SIM card attack, or it's just in using these kind of business email compromise attacks. Just awareness that we're targets. We're going to have to be. It stinks. It feels awkward, feels unusual, but that's something I think that us in fiduciary roles need to have.
Yeah, and we're moving more and more to more of our clients to a verbal verify, a video, an encrypted text, some second form of verification. We've moved to that on almost all. I know all of the cryptocurrency clients do that, where they do some kind of second verification. But even in the cash world, that's a huge thing, is to where like an email should not be able to send a wire. I mean, that's just a silly thing that we got used to doing when we were trying to be expedient, right? And and I use the global we as kind of the accounting finance industry. That was just when we started getting lazy. So there needs to be something in the signature chain where there's a little more clarity or a little bit of a double checking. So they do tend to use the CEO's name. Like a much more of the emails come from you than me.
Yeah.
Because they use the CEO's title to
to
bully a little bit.
Yeah.
But they try lots of different people at the company.
So we mentioned just this awareness, right? Be looking for, just know that you've got a little bit of a target on your back if you're an exec, business owner, someone in accounting, financial capacity. You mentioned the hot cold storage guide, which is a very good one for crypto companies. What do you think about password vaults? What are your thoughts on having a place to kind of keep all those passwords encrypted, or how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I think we probably changed the main password too infrequently.
So the main password, the main password to access the
password vault.
Password vault is what you're referring to.
Like most people are using 1Pass or LastPass or one of the other main encryption vaults, right? I'm not aware of any of their any massive breaches at any of those. But when you talk about single points of failure, you probably have to be pretty sensitive that is a single point of failure if you're keeping all your passwords at those places. I guess my opinion on them is, I mean, I think they're, with the number of passwords we have to maintain, they're a necessary evil, and I'm hoping that their security is high.
I guess it's better than the alternative of not using one. Would you say that's probably fair? If they're used correctly, and you're trying to keep track of passwords in some other way, heaven forbid, an Excel document or a Google Doc
it's way better than a Google Doc. I mean, I guess there's if you can remember all your passwords, there's something else. I just don't know what else is functional with the number of passwords. I mean,
it can be good. It can be good.
How many do you have in your password tool? Like
a lot.
200
passwords, a lot in
some silly amount.
I think the same goes to say for these dual factor authentication SMSs. I mean, it's not. I don't mean to say that these things are terrible and they're bad. They've got vulnerabilities like anything does. There's rarely is there anything that's going to be perfect. I would say that like a password vault or even using dual authentication with SMS is probably better to do that than not do it.
Right.
But an awareness of where the vulnerabilities, or as Matthew calls them, the single point of failure is, where could that be compromised? And there's things like if you use a Google Authenticator or Authy or things like that, those are a little bit stronger than just doing SMS. So that's probably a step in the right direction. There's some other things coming out that are more kind of like the cold storage Matthew mentioned, not just for crypto, that have some physical keys, things like USBs that can give you more control physically in this kind of digital world. So there are definitely those tools out there, but I think they're probably better used than not, but you better go into them understanding what the limitations are, what the vulnerabilities are.
So I'd probably encourage people to use the password tools, but probably use them, not only have your main password written down in one place and that being like a safety deposit box. Or something like that, and change it probably every 90 days or more than we probably do on that. I know I was bad. I probably had the same main password account for quite a long time. But with the spoofing people can do on your website, some of the stuff that's hypersensitive, I don't put in LastPass anymore. In cryptocurrency, for example, I don't put in the recovery seeds for the cold storage. Like anything in cold storage, that's off the grid. Like the recovery key is just a 20 or 27 word password, depending what tool you use. And that's always kept off the grid. The grid being your computer. What else, man?
That's it. I mean, exciting, crazy. It was a crazy day, that fateful July the 15th and the days following, and still not entirely figured out what's going to happen with AT&T and others. I hope that, we're hoping that to share things like this on occasion with folks out there in the event that it will help them, you and your businesses or individually. We'd love to get feedback and comments. One thing you can do to help us out is just subscribe. You'll see the link down there below just to subscribe. Hit that button. Look for
one of those corners.
Look for the more lighthearted, quicker, drink while you think events. you ever want to be on it or post some questions, please do, or give us suggestions on things you think we should try to drink and questions we should answer. Those are a little more lighthearted, but we hope to be giving more content out in an easy way like this. So
yeah, and then
just give us kind of a
more candid way than I think people on webinars seem to regard it. And I think we just need to be real with people. People just need to know the crux of it. They need to know, check all your single points of failure. They need to say, if this happens to you, go to identitytheft.gov and go through the FTC checklist and just go through that as much as possible. Be militant about your passwords and not keeping them on your computer or anything like that, and changing them when people suggest to change them. I mean, there's some pretty simple steps that luckily we had some stuff set up with the cold storage that saved us, because this was a crypto attack. We have stuff set up for the emails so the cache stays safe, that where our employees know they have to call us to get verbal verification if we're telling them to wire money. So, I mean, there's some stuff we can do, and we'll just try to keep it real. We try to keep it real for identity theft, and try to keep it light, because it kind of gets
you kept it real. You kept it real. I mean, you told a very personal story, so it definitely kept it real. If people have questions, please post them. I haven't seen any. That could be my limitation, and we're getting a little new with YouTube Live. That said, post other things there. We'll follow back up with comments in any of these videos that are posted. Again, just let us know if you have other things you want us to address and talk about.
Or if you want to be on Drink and Think.
Yeah. You want to come share a beer or whatever your favorite beverage is. And
drink while you think.
Drink while you think.
It used to be Drink and Think.
I did.
I like it.
I went drink while you think. That wasn't, but back to anybody else who remembers that old college game. I probably shouldn't refer to that, but that's where it came from. So thanks for joining us today. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you, everybody.